because you never let anybody do anything. I mean, they can barely hit the last note of the song. And you're, all right, folks, isn't that really, and he said...
At 92, Mitzi Gaynor finally began sharing stories she kept quiet for most of her life. Stories that peel back the polished glow of Hollywood's golden age and expose a world far messier than audiences ever imagined. For decades, fans believed South Pacific had been filmed in a dreamy tropical paradise where everything ran smoothly. But the truth was nothing like the glossy images on screen. Cast tensions simmered, storms tore through filming locations, major stars crumbled under pressure, and the movie nearly fell apart more than once. Mitzi had carried these memories alone, waiting for the right moment to reveal what really happened behind those deep magenta filters and picture-perfect beaches. That moment arrived when she realized people deserved to know the battles she fought, the heartbreak she endured, and the strength it took to keep smiling when everything around her was collapsing. But this wasn't just a story about a movie. It was the story of how an ordinary girl from Chicago became one of the last surviving legends of an era, defined by ambition, secrecy, and reinvention. And what came next only made her rise more remarkable. Mitzi Gaynor wasn't born into privilege or Hollywood glamour. She entered the world in Chicago in 1931 as Francesca Marlene de Czányi von Gerber, wrapped in the traditions of her Hungarian heritage and surrounded by parents who lived and breathed the arts. Her father played music with the discipline of a man who knew survival depended on skill, while her mother's dance background gave their home a rhythm that shaped every moment. Yet despite the sparkle of creativity, the world outside their walls was unforgiving. The Great Depression forced the family to move from city to city, Elgin, Detroit, and finally Los Angeles, as they chased stability that never seemed to settle. Each move made young Mitzi more alert, more adaptable, more determined to build a life where uncertainty couldn't touch her again. By the time she turned 11 and arrived in LA, she wasn't just a child stepping into a new city. She was a girl quietly preparing to conquer the very industry that towered above her. And she would face her first defining test sooner than she expected. Before Mitzi became Hollywood's radiant triple threat, she experienced a moment that might have broken a different child entirely. At 7 years old, she performed in a small dance recital, dressed in costume and ready to show the audience everything she had rehearsed so carefully. But under the hot stage lights and pressure of watchful eyes, nature won. She had an accident right there on stage in front of everyone, a humiliation most kids would never recover from. Mitzi burst into tears and ran off, but something inside her refused to stay hidden. She wiped her face, dabbed on a little lipstick she found backstage, and marched back out with her chin high. The audience didn't applaud her steps, they applauded her courage. That moment became a private turning point. She learned that fear loses its power the moment you face it head-on. Long before critics, casting directors, or global audiences judged her, Mitzi discovered the one thing that would carry her through every setback: the will to return, even when the spotlight hurts. And that spark grew into something fierce after one life-changing night. At 9 years old, Mitzi sat in a theater and watched Carmen Miranda perform with explosive color, rhythm, and magnetic showmanship. The stage pulsed with movement, and every gesture felt larger than life. Mitzi didn't just admire the performance, she absorbed it. Something inside her clicked, with a force she couldn't explain. She understood, even as a child, that she wasn't meant to stay in the audience. She was supposed to be the one commanding the stage, the one people couldn't look away from. That night planted a seed that grew fast and wild. She began training with a seriousness far beyond her years, pushing her body to move with precision and emotion. She wasn't chasing applause, she was chasing purpose. And when opportunity finally appeared, she didn't hesitate, not even when it meant bending the truth to rewrite her future. By 13, Mitzi wasn't just talented, she was hungry. She wanted real stages, real audiences, real pressure. So when the Los Angeles Civic Light Opera Company held auditions, she knew she had to be there, even though she was far too young. She simply lied and said she was 16. Her confidence was so sharp and her ability so undeniable that no one questioned her. She landed a part in Song Without Words, stepping into the professional world with the boldness of someone who understood that opportunities rarely come twice. Each performance sharpened her instincts, taught her how to control a room, and proved that she could stand shoulder to shoulder with adults who had been performing for years. It wasn't just training, it was survival. And the momentum she built on that stage would soon carry her straight into the heart of Hollywood, where a new identity and a new destiny were waiting for her. When Hollywood finally took notice of the young prodigy tearing up the stage, one thing became clear. Francesca Marlene de Chagny von Gerber was never going to fit on a movie poster. The name carried old-world history and elegance, but studio executives saw something different, a marketing problem. They needed a name that popped, one that felt light, memorable, and easy for audiences to repeat. So the long Hungarian surname melted away, replaced by something breezy and bright. Mitzi Gaynor. The transformation wasn't just cosmetic. It marked the moment she stepped out of her family's story and into her own. With a new identity came new expectations. Hollywood wasn't looking for a shy stage kid. They wanted a star who could sing, dance, act, and sell tickets. Mitzi embraced the challenge without hesitation. And as she walked into her first film auditions under her brand-new name, she had no idea how quickly that decision would propel her into one of the fastest rises of her generation. Mitzi's early film roles were small on paper, but her presence made them unforgettable. In My Blue Heaven, 1950, she appeared briefly as a dancer, yet audiences and critics immediately noticed her confidence, clear, sharp, and impossible to hide. She wasn't just hitting her marks, she was glowing from within. Hollywood was packed with hopefuls at the time, but very few had the ability to dominate a scene without speaking a word. Mitzi did it effortlessly. By 19, she was already crossing the invisible line that separated supporting players from true headliners. Fox executives realized she wasn't just another contract girl. They had someone rare, someone who could compete with the biggest names in musicals. And as she stepped into her first major leading role, she discovered that standing out in Hollywood didn't just come from talent. It came from surviving everything that came with it. With films like Golden Girl and Bloodhounds of Broadway, Mitzi proved she didn't just sing and dance, she commanded a room. Audiences loved her brightness, her humor, and the way she could shift effortlessly from dramatic emotion to playful charm. Hollywood musicals were entering their final great era, and studios were desperately searching for talent that could revive the genre's fading glow. Mitzi arrived at exactly the right moment. Her fresh energy contrasted sharply with the glamorous, smoldering style of other stars like Marilyn Monroe, making her stand out as the approachable, radiant performer audiences wanted to root for. But fame came with pressure. She was pushed into back-to-back films, asked to outshine seasoned stars, and expected to carry movies that entire crews were banking their careers on. Yet she delivered again and again. And next, she would face a challenge that tested not just her stamina, but her ability to hold her own among Hollywood's most intimidating personalities. When Mitzi joined the cast of There's No Business Like Show Business, she found herself surrounded by giants. Ethel Merman, Donald O'Connor, Marilyn Monroe. Names so powerful they could distort the energy of an entire set. Monroe's unpredictable schedule created frustration across the production, with scenes halted for hours while she battled nerves and pressure. Cast members whispered, directors paced, and tension simmered just below the glamorous surface. Mitzi, still young and rising, had to navigate this storm without losing focus. Instead of shrinking beside the megastars, she leaned into discipline, arriving early, knowing her cues, and staying steady even when Monroe's lateness threw everything off. Ironically, that steadiness made her shine brighter. Audiences later praised her warmth and precision, unaware of the chaos swirling behind the scenes. But that experience planted a seed, a belief that she was strong enough to survive anything Hollywood threw at her. And soon, she would make a decision bold enough to shock the industry. Leaving a major studio was considered career suicide in the 1950s, especially for a rising star. Yet Mitzi saw what others refused to acknowledge. The studio system was crumbling, and Fox no longer knew what to do with rising musical talent as the genre began to fade. Instead of letting her career stagnate with roles she didn't believe in, she made the unprecedented choice to walk away. The industry watched closely, expecting her to vanish like so many others who dared to challenge studio control. But the gamble paid off. Suddenly, she was free. Free to choose her projects, free to expand beyond typical musical roles, and free to work with performers whose artistry pushed her further than any studio training ever had. That freedom led her straight into one of the most defining partnerships of her life, setting up a turning point that would stretch her abilities in ways Hollywood never predicted. Mitzi's leap into independence paid off almost instantly when she joined The Joker is Wild, alongside Frank Sinatra. This wasn't the glossy musical world she was used to. It was raw, emotional, and steeped in the real-life pain of comedian Joe E. Lewis. Sinatra approached the role with a seriousness that surprised even the crew, and working beside him forced Mitzi to reach deeper than she ever had on screen. Their scenes weren't just romantic. They carried the weight of two performers trying to capture the messiness of a man rebuilding his life after tragedy. For Mitzi, it was a turning point. She proved she could deliver emotional nuance while still carrying the warmth audiences adored. The film's success, paired with the Oscar-winning song All the Way, elevated her image from musical darling to a performer capable of balancing charm with genuine dramatic presence. This new chapter demanded growth, confidence, and adaptability, and she would soon need all of it when she stepped into the orbit of another Hollywood icon, known for setting impossible standards. Working with Gene Kelly on Les Girls thrust Mitzi into a world where perfection wasn't just expected, it was the baseline. Kelly moved with surgical precision, turning choreography into a language that demanded equal parts stamina and intellect. Mitzi found herself pushed harder than ever before, learning how to match Kelly's timing, wit, and physical intensity, while bringing her own spark to the screen. But the pressure came with rewards. A playful biker-themed number displayed a side of her audiences had never seen, allowing her to combine humor, dance, and mischief in one of the film's most enduring sequences. Off-camera, Kelly's drive taught her how to hold her own among industry powerhouses who expected excellence at every turn. She learned to adapt quickly, take risks, and refine her technique, not because the studio demanded it, but because legends like Kelly forced her to level up. She didn't know it yet, but these lessons would become her armor when she stepped into the casting battle that nearly tore apart one of Hollywood's most beloved musicals. The race to cast Nellie Forbush in South Pacific wasn't just competitive, it was ruthless. Elizabeth Taylor wanted the role desperately, convinced her beauty alone could secure the part. But during her audition, nerves overwhelmed her, and she stumbled through the songs with trembling uncertainty. Richard Rodgers, known for his legendary standards, dismissed her instantly. Doris Day was approached next, but she saw the role's demands and declined, unwilling to commit to the grueling production schedule. With two of Hollywood's biggest names out, the field suddenly cracked wide open, and Mitzi stepped in. She wasn't the most famous contender, but she had something priceless: skill in all three disciplines and the willingness to prove it in front of anyone. Her first audition at the Beverly Hills Hotel wasn't just good, it was electrifying. She performed a cockeyed optimist and honey bun with a mix of humor, musical precision, and emotional warmth that captured the room. But winning the part wasn't guaranteed. She still had to face the man whose approval mattered most, and he wasn't convinced she belonged. Richard Rodgers had built some of the most iconic scores in American history, and he guarded his work with unwavering intensity. When Mitzi advanced to her second audition, she knew she had to do more than sing well. She had to win over a man who believed only a select few were worthy of his characters. Rodgers doubted her voice, unsure if she had the strength and clarity to carry Nellie's emotional arc. Most actresses would have crumbled under that kind of judgment, but Mitzi leaned into it. She delivered, "I'm in love with a wonderful guy," with a sincerity that left the room silent. Rodgers watched her closely, waiting for a flaw to reveal itself, but instead, he saw something he didn't expect. A performer who understood the heart of Nellie Forbush better than any competitor. Her humor felt natural, her optimism real, and her voice, once questioned, rang with the confidence of someone who knew she belonged. By the end of the audition, doubt turned into reluctant admiration. Mitzi had earned the role. But landing, it was only the beginning. The real trials began the moment she set foot on the beaches of Hawaii. Filming in Kauai was nothing like the tranquil paradise audiences later saw on film. The weather shifted so violently that lighting changed mid-sentence, forcing the crew to restart scenes again and again. Clouds rolled in without warning, casting shadows over footage the studio had already spent thousands of dollars shooting. And then came the breaking point. A massive tidal wave struck the island on March 9, 1957, collapsing bridges, stranding equipment trucks, and shutting down production entirely. Cast and crew scrambled for safety as the coastline transformed into chaos. Supplies ran low. Travel between Honolulu and Kauai stalled for days. Each setback drained the budget and tested everyone's morale. Yet through all of it, Mitzi never lost the optimism that had won her the role in the first place. Her resilience became a quiet anchor for the production, keeping spirits afloat while the island battered them with one disaster after another. Still, the worst challenges weren't behind them. A controversial artistic decision, one that would divide fans for decades, was waiting just around the corner. As filming dragged on in Kauai, director Joshua Logan made a decision that stunned the entire crew. He wanted the emotions of South Pacific to feel heightened, dreamlike, almost theatrical. So he ordered bold color filters placed directly onto the camera lens. Suddenly, scenes glowed in purples, fiery oranges, sea green shadows, and surreal golden washes. To Logan, the color shifts mirrored the intensity of each musical moment. But Rodgers and Hammerstein were horrified. They felt the filters distracted from the performances and overpowered the music. Movie theaters across America received confused complaints from audiences who thought their projectors were broken. Even critics became divided, calling the look either visionary or disastrous. Mitzi watched all of this unfold with mixed emotions. She admired the courage behind the choice, yet worried whether viewers would be so consumed by colors that they overlooked the heart of the story. Still, production pushed ahead. What no one realized was that the artistic battles were nothing compared to the physical toll that awaited Mitzi in her most famous scene. The cheerful energy of "wash that man right out of my hair" hid the brutal reality of filming it. The tropical waterfall audiences adored was actually icy water pumped through metal pipes, drenching Mitzi for hours as she repeated every verse with bright enthusiasm. Her hair had to stay covered in suds from take to take, which meant constant relathering while singing in perfect rhythm. The first shampoo they used seared her eyes so badly that she had to stop mid-take, stumbling off camera with tears streaming down her face. A frantic crew member drove miles to find baby shampoo just to keep the scene alive. The sand beneath her feet shifted with every step, making balance nearly impossible as she moved through the choreography. Yet Mitzi refused to break character, pushing through the cold, the pain, and the exhaustion with a smile convincing enough to fool millions. It became one of the most iconic moments in musical film history. Yet behind that effortless charm was a woman fighting to keep her performance from collapsing under physical strain. And soon, a new challenge emerged in the form of her charming yet complicated leading man. Rossano Brazzi looked every inch the romantic lead, but behind the scenes, he carried insecurities that complicated filming. His English was limited, making emotional dialogue difficult, and the studio quietly decided to dub all his singing with opera baritone Giorgio Tosi, something he initially tried to hide. Mitzi, instead of growing frustrated, adjusted her performance to match his cadence, guiding scenes with gentle cues that helped him find the emotional beats. Their friendship developed through small moments, shared laughter over mispronounced words, long rehearsals under unpredictable weather, and patient attempts to synchronize their performances. What audiences later interpreted as irresistible chemistry came from hours of careful communication between two very different performers. Brazzi admired Mitzi's discipline, while she appreciated his sincerity and warmth. Their bond made the romance on screen feel genuine, even though one voice belonged to another man entirely. But once filming wrapped and the cameras stopped rolling, Mitzi discovered that even a massive hit couldn't guarantee the future Hollywood had once promised her. Everything pointed to South Pacific being the turning point of Mitzi's movie career. It became a global hit, earning staggering profits and cementing her as a beloved star of musical cinema. Fans assumed she would be flooded with opportunities, but the industry was changing faster than anyone anticipated. Studio musicals, the very genre that showcased Mitzi's gifts, were beginning to vanish as Hollywood embraced darker, edgier stories shaped by a new generation of filmmakers. Within months, projects that once would have been perfect for her simply no longer existed. Instead of more film offers, she faced a sudden quiet that felt surreal after such explosive success. Mitzi realized she could wait for roles that might never come, or she could reinvent herself before the industry left her behind. She chose reinvention. That decision pushed her toward a medium she had never fully explored, one that demanded stamina, charm, and adaptability. And she soon proved she possessed all three in ways no one expected. Television variety shows were becoming the new arena for entertainers, and Mitzi stepped into the spotlight with effortless command. Her greatest television moment arrived in 1964 on The Ed Sullivan Show, during the same broadcast that featured the Beatles. who were, at that very moment, reshaping global culture. Yet despite the frenzy around the Fab Four, Mitzi was the night's headliner. She delivered a fiery set filled with crisp choreography and powerful vocals, shifting from playful charm to full-scale glamour without losing a breath. Backstage, she watched the Beatles pacing nervously, unsure how American audiences would respond. Her own choreographer jokingly mistook Paul McCartney for a teenage extra, unaware he was part of the sensation sweeping the world. Mitzi felt no competition. She knew she belonged on that stage just as much as they did. Her performance proved she wasn't a fading star from Hollywood's past, but a dynamic entertainer capable of dominating any platform. And soon, she would take that confidence to a city that would elevate her fame to towering new heights. When Mitzi transitioned into Las Vegas, she didn't just join the scene, she dominated it. Her shows at the Flamingo and Riviera drew crowds that rivaled major headliners, and her weekly earnings soared to numbers most film stars never touched. Vegas audiences loved her precision, humor, and the effortless glamour she carried on stage. Working with designer Bob Mackie, she transformed each performance into a spectacle of sequins, color, and movement that felt entirely her own. Night after night, she delivered high-energy routines that pushed her stamina to its limits, yet she made every step look easy. Critics described her shows as electric, polished, and impossible to top. Mitzi realized something important. She didn't need Hollywood to define her success. In Vegas, she controlled the spotlight, built her own brand, and proved she was one of the few entertainers who could reinvent themselves without losing who they were. And soon, television would amplify that glow even further. Mitzi's move into TV quickly turned into a historic winning streak. Over the course of 9 television specials, she earned 16 Emmy nominations, each show bigger and more ambitious than the last. Her partnership with Bob Mackie became legendary. His dazzling costumes elevated her performances into visual feasts, with intricate beadwork and colors that seemed to dance under studio lights. Specials like Mitzi Roarin' in the 20s and Mitzi, What's Hot, What's Not showcased her range, blending humor, dance, and theatrical flair in ways few performers could replicate. Viewers tuned in not just for her talent, but for the sense that anything could happen. She proved variety television could be glamorous, modern, and creatively daring. Mitzi wasn't just surviving the changes in entertainment, she was shaping them. And just when fans thought she couldn't surprise them anymore, she made a bold return to the world that first shaped her. In 1989, Mitzi stepped back into the theater spotlight to lead a national tour of Anything Goes, taking on the demanding role of Reno Sweeney. Many quietly wondered if she could still command a stage with the same fire she carried in her youth. Those doubts evaporated the moment she performed her first number. Mitzi delivered crisp choreography, sharp comedic timing, and powerhouse vocals with the confidence of someone who never left the stage at all. The tour traveled across North America, and audiences greeted her with standing ovations night after night. Critics praised her stamina and elegance, marveling at how she maintained such vibrancy decades into her career. For Mitzi, the experience wasn't just a comeback, it was a reclaiming of her identity as a performer born for live audiences. And this renewed confidence led her back to a place she once thought she might never revisit. When Mitzi visited Kauai in 2009 to celebrate South Pacific's 50th anniversary, she wasn't sure how she would feel stepping onto the island that once tested her spirit. But the moment she arrived, the memories came rushing back. The storms, the long days, the laughter with castmates, the fear during the tidal wave, and the thrill of creating something timeless. Fans welcomed her with open arms, treating her as part of the island's history. She visited Luma High Beach, where she filmed her iconic hair-washing scene, and Mount Makana, the stand-in for Bali Hai. The island looked almost unchanged, as if waiting for her return. Instead of reopening old wounds, the trip brought closure. She realized how deeply that film shaped her life, not just through fame, but through the resilience it forced her to build. And one more chapter of her personal story demanded reflection. Mitzi married Jack Bean in 1954, entering a partnership that would anchor her career for more than 50 years. Bean left his prestigious job at MCA to form his own agency, with Mitzi as his first and most important client. He believed in her gifts so completely that he structured his entire professional life around supporting her. Together, they built a career that outlasted Hollywood trends, relying on trust instead of publicity and mutual respect instead of spectacle. They never had children, but Mitzi always said their bond was its own world, steady, private, and fiercely loyal. Bean guided her through career reinventions, negotiated her major deals, and protected her from the industry's harshest edges. When he passed, Mitzi kept his memory close, describing him as the reason she survived decades of shifting entertainment landscapes. Her story wasn't just about stardom, it was about a lifelong partnership that gave her the courage to evolve again and again.